transcendent knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times, by means of Prajnaparamita, fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, rejoiced, is the words of the Blessed One. Shandarazam Arayam Ve Teyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha Mbaba Gonja Zonji Gaiden Be Doji She Badoji Me Badoji She Wadoji Dagi Baji Metum Beju Danji She Dingor Yezo Gerin Donya Jejo Jewada Midon Nube Yenan Dewada Tamba Junjin Bunzon Zon Yoji Daji De Jan and Adele. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. ye zu lama dam pa yi ra ni yu la ni ni yu ni ni ra za me ru ye ma la za ye yu ya ba du zo. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Edam Guru Radha Mandala Gam Niradayami. Zayi Janam La Yanju Badu Dani Yasuchi Dagi Chenye Jibe Sonam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Dubayo. Jadan Zayi Janam La Yanju Badu Dani Yasuchi Dagi Chenye Jibe Sonam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Dubayo. Jadan Zayi Janam La Yanju Badu Dani Yasuchi Nagi Chenye Jibe Sonam Ji Rola Benji Zanye Dubayo.
Dana Suhodene Lari Watan Taibare Talaja Zawashin Temisu and the Judajan River, Niden, the Judajan River Dala, Taitan Hibla Bishuku, Nibajeta Lamsu, Nibajeta Lamsu Dala, Jabuchungo the Tomo Laja River, Jambu Sudan, Rindan, Tomo Laja Revolution, Jabuchimbi Laja Revolution, and the Jabuchungo Laja Revolution, Dala. 네, 가서 이제 shima 되는 줄로 집어다. 이제 shima 돼 터템바. 이제 shima 돼 터템바 전도다. 레데니가 넌 레데 가도도 말왜. 레데들라 네바들 델레 타지지 저와의 시지 대바 제발라송. 레데시 상바다. 시다도 상바. 산내 조도 샤출로 서버데 수 레데도 가도래도 말왜. Tambo Kaza, Jodusha Sulu, Tambo Lani, Lendeshi de Longuentan, Société Sambanici, Tango de la Jima Lengabitu, les Pechawa, les Majiba de Majeva, les Javachumas of Gigi, Tachin Das Société Sambataka to Lady Marba, what to Lady Mara, Rose.
So again, we are looking at Lama Tsong-kha-pa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. And in going through the initial outline, we find how to rely upon the teacher that is the root of the path, and then the stages of the path, the stages of the path that students engage in after having relied on the teacher. And then under that category of the stages of the path, or the stages that students engage in after having relied upon the teacher, we find two categories. First, an exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, and then how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So under the category of how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, we find three categories. First, training the mind in the stages of the path path shared in common with beings of small capacity. Then training the mind, the stages of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And then training the mind, the stages of the path for beings of great capacity. So these are the first three categories. And then under the training the mind, the stages of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity, we find three categories. The actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, the measure of the attitude of a person of small capacity, and then dispelling any misconceptions related to the person of small capacity. So these are the three categories related to that. And then under the first category, the actual training of thought of a person of small capacity, we find two categories: developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then a second category of relying on a means or a method for achieving happiness in one's next life. So going to that last category of the method or a means for achieving happiness in one's next life, we find two major categories. First, the category of refuge, and then the category of karma and its results. So we're currently dealing with the section on karma and its result. So if we go to the English, if you want to turn to page 210, that's where we're going to be in the English. And so it begins with reflecting on karma and its effects in general. And then there are two major categories there: the actual way in which you reflect in general, and then the reflecting on the distinctions among the varieties of karma, or the differences among the varieties of karma. So we've gone through the first section, which deals with four specific categories: the certainty of karma, the magnification of karma, not experiencing the effects of actions that you do not do, and that the actions that you have done do not perish. So these are the first category in the general section. And now we've come to reflecting on the distinctions among the varieties of karma, and that then starts to deal with the 10 paths, the 10 paths of action. So that is going to start on page 215 or 216 is where the actual body of the text is, where we get into the distinctions. But it started on 210, but we're at now the 216 distinction. Dixon.
Yeah. Ta sosu shit sambatala ni sosu shit sambatala le lan ju tu temba ta le dan de temba sa ji ni de doa le lan ju tu temba ta wa de le lan ju tu temba ta le dan de bo ane le lan ju tu temba che tene le dan de bo de la papa ma sa ji ni de ma sa ji ni re doa
Less so.
Ta le lan ju tu temba se yung doa le lan ju le lan ta gawa ju da ma gawa ju yo ma gawa ju da ma gawa ju yo ro ma gawa ju no ne le yi le son bote ne lan yi le mai what the le lan se yung doa le lan.
Oh, okay.
He na sen de luta sombote
Less so.
ne na sen de luta sombote ngandu lai na so ba le mai ma do ane ka le je le na ba so nga ke na ba je du euro du bote na so ba je la yi le ni ka yis
ni ka
yis
okay
o te le lan les langues du tout temba les langues ni on de que te juro sont langues d'une légende sont langues d'une légende au tel de mando samare ane sont langues débat mago jugna nan iji le nation de saluta sont bote nga so penji langue les maïs sont langues d'une légende ta le langue les d'une marbe le langue les d'une bote ane nga so penji le mamaze la ni ga is ni ga son la d'une son la iji na sen de saluta sont bote nga so penji la son la d'une les gens ils sont deux ane le jile na ba so nga na ba je d'une marbe le nga le d'une bote ane nga so penji la mamaze nga so penji le is
okay lay down
la ni ga is hotel he de ma no ka so nga so damal ji doa gi chile marbe 레드라 때는 시라 마이 조인스 그래서 오마 탄주역이 조인스 근데 너도 봐서 보는 사람도 뭐시면 존도 탄주장 너도 봐서 보는 사람도 어떨 때면 사람도 어때야
Then the zoo, the dumba, the dun lay in Kalen dang.
르가가 레드부터
Zugara Kalen.
르가가 레드부터 레이 조인스 조인스라
Oh,
마이
Zuyin. Okay.
너도 봐서 조인스
Okay,
그래서
Zuyin.
이제 나와서도 레마이도 조마인 베셔 라이 레마이도 조마인 베셔 어떨 때도 그래서 사바레
Mayinde Zumayim Bichir, Sheba Yim.
어때 달 때도 그래서 다이나 올마 제비 오래
Okay. We gave the.
야
So when we get to the reflecting on the distinction among the varieties of karma, or the difference among the varieties of karma, we find two major categories: the principal teachings of the 10 paths of action, and then the determination of the effects of action. So when we get to the first category, the principal teaching of the 10 paths of action, what is this referring to? So when we look at these facts, and we look at virtue and non-virtue, and we enumerate them by 10, we find there the virtue of the body, speech, and mind, and non-virtue of the body, speech, and mind. We find 3 virtues and non-virtues of the body, 4 virtues and non-virtues of the speech, and 3 virtues and non-virtues of the mind. So I just tried to summarize that point into one. So we find those 3 in each of those categories. So when we look at the classification of these, when we look at the karma or action that is created by the mind, so when we look at non-virtuous actions of the mind, such as covetousness, harmful intent, or wrong view, we would say that categorically these are pathways which propel one to the lower realms, but are not categorically actions that propel one to the lower realms. So there is a reason for this. So we state that these are these paths of action of the mind, mental action, when we're speaking of non-virtue again. These are necessarily pathways, but not action. So the reason we say they aren't action or they are not activity is because they are not qualified by being form. So I'll get back to that point in a moment. So the virtues and non-virtues, and we're going to look at the case of non-virtue of the body, are enumerated in total, body and speech rather, are enumerated by the total number of 7. So we have killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct of the body of being 3, and then lying, divisive speech, gossip, and harsh words being 4 of the speech. So these all categorically would fall under a common locus between the 2, action and pathway. So if we're looking in the case of non-virtue, we can say that any among these 7 are necessarily both actions that propel one to the lower realms, as well as pathways to the lower realms. So this is a common locus between pathways to the lower realms that propel one to the lower realms and actions that propel one to the lower realms. So we find in this case of these 7 non-virtues, they would be a common locus between those 2, actions and pathways. The reason that we say that the non-virtues, because we use the case of non-virtue, of the mind are not actions but are pathways to the lower realms, is because we find in the Vinaya text where they quote the Abhidharma, where it states that actions are necessarily form, according to the Great Exposition School and the Middle Way Consequence School. And because action is necessarily form, that means that mental activity, which is consciousness, has to not be that, because consciousness and form are mutually exclusive. That's a translator's note, that one statement. Consciousness and form are mutually exclusive. So the reason that we can say that activity of the mind is not action is because it's not form. And form is the qualification necessary for something to be an action, or vice versa. Action is necessarily form. And again, we find that according to the Prasangika as well as the Great Exposition School. So the lowest school and the highest school concur that action is form. So this reason, it negates the potential for mental activity being action, because it is necessarily not form, and therefore, but is a pathway to the low that propels one to the lower realms. So is path. So it is path, but isn't form. So it's that which is this, but not that. But in the case of the 7, we would find it the case where it is both form and action. So I think that covers all the points. If I was redundant, I apologize, but it was a little difficult.
나는 가르쳐 고르스나 안에 먹이주베데 또 봉고래 안에 거와주든 또 나서래 고르스 안에 먹이주다 거와주데 안에 르질레 당아글레 소부가로 얘나 먹어주 가로미 차바데 요 말데 안에 먹어 쳐왔다 라박걸로 뒤는 상지고데 먹어 주송 버리스 말베 주송 버리스 대 도주는 거와죠 송버레스 상제가 송버레트네 도단 대주지는 레란주 또 대바서 때말베 누이가서데 먹어줘 송요아래 거와줘 송요
Lesso.
네 대주 되는 저 말하면서 안에 텔레처럼 되는 그다 먹지리바 레전한 조송소스 레란주 또 대바서 카도도 어때면 호든도 진도와
The dona, the lungane, the tama cheran lung, the lung kabane, doa.
doa de woden doa
Ah, lessa, zudan doa nika yamba
de woden lonaji marbe lonaji
lessa,
lonaji doa de doa
lessa,
naji le ne leji le nabaso naga nabajesa ulle
lessa.
tamal mateshi jorwa 다 어디 제일모지 가도 가서지 친친 사버에 로 차지 로잖아
lessa.
대대들 도두기 전에 소소 내봐다 레게비도래 레페쳐와다 마제바다 메테치 셰바 추면서 리바데 타말시
Lessa.
시차버레스
Lesso.
다 레단데비 주 제나와시라 네 토마 내바지네 란도 샤냐나스 레단 데부 간데질드네 담시베지 안에 보아저 가르봉고레 냐래 가르제 고르스나
Lesso.
좋아도 그거 말베
Lesso.
고신도와
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we go to page 216. Again, we have the principal teaching of the 10 passive action and the determination of the effects of action. So we're going to begin with the principal teaching of the 10 passive action. What's the reason for this word, principal teaching? So we say that these 10 passive action are the principal points that the Buddha made, or the most important points related to virtue and non-virtue that the Buddha made, but they are in no way pervade all possibilities of virtue and non-virtue. So if it is a virtue or a non-virtue, it is not necessarily among the 10 virtues and non-virtues, but these are the most important points, are the key beginning points. So the Buddha enumerated them as 10 to give a baseline or a frame of reference for the most important actions that are virtuous and non-virtuous. So this is the reason that the Buddha made these points. So when we go back to what we've already reflected on, we find the actual way in which to reflect in general. And we find the 4 points of the certainty of karma, the magnification of karma, the not experiencing the affections of actions that you do, and that the actions that you have done do not perish. So once one has learned this and has an understanding and has this as his or her basis, what then should one do? So this is the question that's going to be addressed now. So what should one do? What should one adopt, practice? what should one cast aside or abandon? Then we get. So we get into this question then. Given that I have understood the causality of happiness and suffering, as explained previously, have understood that karma increases, and that I will not meet with the results of actions that I have done, and that actions that I have done will not perish, about what sorts of karma and effects should I initially develop certainty? So we're going over those 4 points and looking at what we're going to be certain about and so forth. So which should I adopt and which should I cast aside? So here, now that one has learned those 4 points, what then how should one begin? What should one do then? What should one practice? What should one cast aside? And when we look back at this point, the principle, we can find various sources in the sutra as well as the Vinaya, and in lower, underneath here, we find the 10 passive action, guarding your speech, being restrained mentally, and not committing physical non-virtues. So here we find references that are going to we'll go into later, that point out these 10 principal pathways, virtuous and non-virtuous, that the Buddha explained. And then Lama Tsong-kha-pa will explain why these 10 were presented, but these 10 are not necessarily an all-inclusive number. Dixon.
Sondun dulas lu nga yisonde. Sondun nugres. Gawa yina lu nga yisonde sa agure. Gawa yina lu nga yisonde gune sa agure. Sondun nga la sa. Gosonje magawa tangje magawa tangje leje la ju mandu jang lu nga yisonde magawa yina magawa ju kan ron mi chago mare du mandu jang ne magawa na chelung nga raba kana matu je chewa na ne jonden de ne dunes jonden de ne dune magawa chewa zu ngalo na bi la lan ju song bares chewa ngalo ru je ne ju song bares lunga yi so magawa yin ju ba ru me de chago ma de chewa raba wa du so nga ju song bares tada pomba yina magawa ju bu de 상지 송자 주부도 pombayina 신도 전신도 치 내나자 교른도와 지네사 교른도와 지네 먹주본 수대송 말베 지네 가빌레나 조송데사 된돌로도 송바레스 운도 올도와 단절레 텔레첼론 뒤에는 그다음에 지리바 레전한 조송소스 어떤 저그 세븐도다
그래서
령아에서 먹어 이나 먹어 주부 강으로 차고 말해대 령아에서 네 먹어 철롱아 라바도 그거도 네 뒤네 네 상지가 조송 버레스 어디 이제 철롱 뒤네네 그다 먹어 조송 거와주도 먹어 조송 버레스
그래서
셰탄사 론나지 다 론데 이말 상지가 론나지 존다바 론트지 what doa long de segro long nanje doa long nanje les ta goson se deres goson marwa ngana sonjin ye jira dantes ngago ne debazu gason gore na chela soba ane ye jira dante ye 나선에 살아서 또 그걸로 가고 그래서 뢰제 먹어와다 매지 진스 다 뢰제를 건 소지바 마지막에 봐 근데 로이도 그걸로 가고 그래서 말베 레랑 sombo 다다 라jannas 레랑 sombo 네 먹어 주부터 장토바이나 pon토바이나 카토바이나 transon sombi 네란 transon sombi lan toba joro she son so terendwa saji go wate gawaju dama gawaju dun so to lo teremde.
That's true, you're right.
Yeah.
The Leilan Ju. Garashene Leilan Ju. The Yichi Gewa, lay mayin.
Gi le jo, magi le jo sene lava yina.
Lay.
Ta shida mawa ta oma tanjo ki chiwa shiye de duwa. Le ta. Shida mawa ta oma tanjo le na zo yim chasa. Chawdu le yiji le somba de zo maro ta.
Then yichi lay mayin.
Yiji le tu su ngalo.
Lay minda.
Le na som penji la yi le mai. Le mai zo mai bish. Sheba yim bish. Wo din zaman.
Megewe lay dun.
Magi dun de magi le yi na som penji la ni ka is. Dun le chang is.
Then garshine megewa ju. The mingda. Lay ju.
Mago ju yoro da.
Megewe lay ju
Mago ju
yomare.
magi le ju de jago mar se ko.
Ah le.
Yi le som de ane shida ma do ba shida ma ta.
Lesa.
Oma thanju ga chen na ro da. Ane sanzang ba ta oma raju ba ta ane do ba tu su ne pon ise ba mar be. Ku zu trota ma je chaba le ga do.
Then garshine mingda lay lam ju. Lay lam ju.
Son lance. Yi na sen de sen lo da son be na son pe je la is. Le mais. Le mai zo mai me shi. Dun de le nga dun de son la dun le jang dun de la nga zo pe la ma ma se le jang is. Son la dun le jang is. O de le de da do da.
Lesa. Two Chenrezig. Go on, Michi. I had a question. I'll get to it in a second, so I don't forget to translate what we're going through. So here, then Lama Tsong-kha-pa has a reply to what one should practice and what one should cast aside. It says, reply, in general, you can conclude that there are three ways to engage in good and bad conduct, physically, verbally, and mentally. Although not all the virtues and non-virtues of these three ways are included within the 10 paths of action. So if it is a virtue or non-virtue, it is not necessarily included among the 10 paths of virtuous or non-virtuous actions. So we're saying that doesn't pervade all. And then it says, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, summarizing the key points, taught the most obvious or course among the virtues and non-virtues as being the 10 paths of virtuous and non-virtuous actions. He taught that the extremely great foundations for a misdeed are the 10 paths of non-virtuous action. He saw that when you give up these 10, you adopt virtuous actions, and that the most important points of these virtuous actions are also 10 in number. The Gewele Jew. Yine the Gewele Dun, Jew Yomare. Garshene. The Gewele Jew Yure. Yine Gewele Jew Yomare. Gewele Dun. Then Garshene.
That's Ruda Majedu.
Okay. Okay.
Oma Tanjo Jena and Lela Zui is the
lesser, okay.
The is not a Hiji, Nasan Lutas on the Nazum Pejig Lare,
okay.
Lemar is my measure. What is
okay. Therefore, he taught the 10 paths of virtuous actions. The Treasury of Knowledge then states, systemizing the most obvious among them, the Buddha said that the paths of action, virtuous or non-virtuous, are 10. And then the Exegesis of Discipline gets in, the Vinaya says, if you practice these 10 paths of action, guarding your speech, so here we're looking at the way that one commits actions through body, speech, and mind. So guarding one's speech is guarding against the 4 non-virtues of the speech, of lying, harsh words, gossip, and divisive speech. Being restrained mentally means restraining one's mind from the 3 non-virtues of harmful intent, covetousness, and wrong view. And then not committing physical non-virtues is referring to refraining from the 3 non-virtues of the body of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. So it says, you will achieve the path taught by the sage. So if you are able to abandon these negative pathways through your body, speech, and mind, then you are able to, by doing so, you are engaging in the pathway that is taught by the sage, which is the pathway of virtue, which is the opposite. So we come up with the 10 virtues by looking at the 10 non-virtues and their abandonment. So then it says here, you will achieve the path taught by the sage. So the point that the question I'm asking, that I'm stuck on right now, is if they're not actions, why does it keep saying 10 actions of the body, 10 actions of the mind, the actions, and then we go and say, why doesn't it say the 7? So this is what I'm stuck on. Why is the number 10 if they're not really 10 actions? And Rinpoche is saying that this is a tenet system situation where we're looking at the differences as far as the actual words, the terms themselves and what they mean to the tenet systems. So there's a distinction that's made that it's a pathway that actively sends you to the lower realm. So I have to look at the wording now, go back home and see if there's a way to make this so in English it doesn't seem loaded as much. But it's in the Abhidharma text it says that it is a pathway, the mental activity is a pathway that brings you or propels you to the lower realms, but is not an action because it isn't form. Because according to the Abhidharma, the Consequence School and the Great Exposition School say that action is necessarily form. So this is just taking the tenet systems and applying it to the terms that are made here and clarifying them with real subtlety. So I don't know if that would change the way that you would technically translate this. It might not at all. But I just wanted to, people might be thinking that, so I asked Rinpoche that question, and he just 3 times answered me the same way, that it's clarified according to the tenet systems. They don't all agree, and Rinpoche is just pointing out that the Prasangika view and the exposition view agree that these are pathways, all of which are pathways to the lower realms if they are among the 10 non-virtues, but they are not all necessarily actions, because 3 among them are activities of the mind which are consciousness and not form, so they are not action, technically speaking, according to those tenet systems. So that's the clarification as far as I could get and understand. Kanga dowa the kanga lasa. Nene jao the
toba ju she son so what the batulta jaji be saji le lan ju tu temba de la saji son de ne do dan ten ju le lan ju tu tembi tu se de what the batu se de le lan ju tu temba res
tambo
de batres toba ju ro she son so what the batu che ta den ma ni ba de le ma go ju po ya go ju nyang se la je da ge ke chi res ke chi bi ba ten was that then nabi lelang jun debutan cheba sa nabi lelang jun debutan cheba ne nabi lelang jo debutan cheba shine tada ki kulun zang ne jang dang de gosun tada tang yi mande bare shebi gwa ju leje lang temba de ne tota pa son tangje do jibi tueni toda bason tanje de jibi tueni drubi rande de jende ni drubi jimed moron wes magi jubu tsute de wote jibi rande de jende druya ge jimed moron adres moron we jayu gutomane jawa shaja tobe gutomane na ya to khaba yede za yana to khaba yede jasu shuba lese yana to khaba yede jasu ale tombo wot chi la jaga tand marwa le lan ju to te was je lan ji sa ji ji ro
tambo
oden jang ji sa ji son ti mo ta le lan ju to te bi su sa de
tambo
ode do da ju ko da ju tu ko le lan ju to te mares le nga ye so ke kema ka ron la ma ko chu ta ko chu ko ron chaba yo mare te raba ta chulong ka du ne go chu ta ma ki chu sa ji ko son bare ju le son bare zu te mas te chu so di za mar ba ron na ji ta Lenaju to them to the jet. Tanyeba the Mago Jeda Kitchore, and the Goaju draw the Jeda Kitching, but there, Saji Niba.
Okay.
Then goes on waters over there.
Less so. Now, when we look at the category, the principal teaching of the 10 passive action, we find there's one category, obviously, there in the Great Treatise. And we look at Jayan Sheba's commentary on this Great Treatise. That category is then broken down into 3 categories. The first part deals with that actual point, the principal teaching. Why is it the principal teaching? Why was this given? This is the course outline of the most important points. We find quotes from sutras, and Jayan Sheba says sutra and tantric teachings state that these are the principal or the important 10 paths. So we find various sources to prove that these are the principal teachings related to action. So that's the first category Jayan Sheba states is within this, is why it's the principal teaching and where the sources are for that. The next category is the one we're going to get in now, that deals with the great importance of abandoning the 10 non-virtuous activities and engaging in the 10 virtuous activities. So this is the second point that's about to be made within that first category, according to Jayan Sheba. So it says, knowing the 10 paths of non-virtuous action and their effects. So knowing all of their effects, restrain yourself from being motivated to commit them. So then practice the paths of action of the 10 virtues in which your body, speech, and mind are not all mixed with the paths of non-virtuous action. This practice is indispensable as the basis for all 3 vehicles, as well as for the accomplishment of the 2 aims of beings. Hence, the conqueror repeatedly praised it from many perspectives. And then we're going to find a quote from the questions of the Naga kings of the ocean. So that's where we stopped. Long lat mason.
Hello. Tanda Suzwa. Tanda Nama Jubung Sujin Swa, Magujuma, Jida Kitchen, but the Tenema Tango artist. Nabi Lelance, Nabi Lelan Jun, Debutan Jiba, Nabi Lelan Jun, Debutan Jiba, Shiba J, and Shene, Tadaki, Kunun Zaya, Dantes, Tamaguju Marbe, Magujute, and the Kunun Dante, Gosun Tadatamade, Gosun. Le nga yi kusumde le ji magawa da nga ga magawa da yi ji magawa da mande ba magi jubung chudin so a jeda ge nga chures magi jubung chudin so ba de ne magi jubung chudin so ba de ne jibu chungule go gore ndin le go gore jibu chimbule go gore chamal le go gore saji da bore saje ne shin da na che ga chamalo ne sala den chegro marbe and Jibusong Langalo and the Mugibung shooting Sajila Tene and the Chigure, Dendu de Amogibung shooting Sajila Ten Yungure, Taba de Amogibung shooting Sajila Ten Yungure, Tebashan Sanji and Sanji Dan, Teba Chibil out to Gala Mugibung shooting Sajila Ten Yungures, what the song is at Kitchures, Mugibung shooting Swan Kitchures. Tarsa Nabi. Nabi Lelan Jun Debutan Jeba, Shene, Tadaki Kulun Tane Jang Dante, Gusun Tadatan, Mandrebara Shebi, Gewaju Leche, Ne Lante Madenesa, Teba Sun Tanji Dance, Teba Sun Tuji Teba, Raja Teba, teaching Teba Marbe, Tanjil to Gugures, Tanji Dan, Jebi Deni Drubi, Jebi Ten Kanza Randon and Jendo Drubi. J'ai met mon res, Randon les Gougre, j'ai deux les Gougres, Maron you.
Lasso.
Maron, ils sont en Jawashaja Tobe, Gotomane, Yana Yanto, Moritu Sudin de la Kabashida Juvares, Shedaya Wares, or the Jiju.
So knowing the 10 paths of non-virtuous actions and their effects, restrain yourself from being motivated to commit them. So one should, once one knows what the results of non-virtuous actions are, one should separate oneself from those activities and engage in their opposites, engage in the practices of the virtuous activities. So once one understands this, then practice the paths of action of the 10 virtues in which your body, speech, and mind are not all mixed with the paths of non-virtuous action. So it's saying abandon the non-virtuous activities through your body, speech, and mind, and then take on the virtuous activities of your body, speech, and mind. Once one understands the relationship between action and consequences, or action and results. It says this practice is indispensable as the basis for all 3 vehicles, as well as for the accomplishment of the 2 aims of beings. Hence the conqueror repeatedly praised it from many perspectives. So here, the 10 paths of action, the abandonment of the 10 non-virtuous actions and the practice of the 10 virtuous actions become the basis for the pathways shared in common with beings of small capacity, the pathways shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and the pathways for beings of great capacity. So we find, just like a tree needs a basis or a ground to grow from, all of these capacities need ethics as their basis to flourish, or to actually work, to be practiced right, if you will. So all of these require this basis of ethical discipline. So if one wishes to achieve rebirth in the higher realms through the pathways of small capacity, then it's necessary to have this basis of ethical discipline. If one wishes to achieve the state of liberation through the pathways of shared in common with of medium capacity, then ethical discipline, these 10 practices, these 10 actions become a necessary basis. And also the pathways for beings of great capacity, the Mahayana pathways, require these 10 paths of action, ethics, to be at the basis of this great vehicle, or the cause, if you will. The basis is really, the foundation is really the most literal way, the foundation of all of these 3. So here it says, as the basis for all 3 vehicles. So these 3 vehicles are speaking specifically of the hearer's vehicle, solitary realizer vehicle, and the bodhisattva vehicle. So we find that ethics are the basis of that. And it says, as well as for the accomplishment of the 2 aims of being. So here the 2 aims of beings are the accomplishment of one's own aims, as well as the aims of others. So these are the 2 possibilities of aims, one's own aims and the aims of others. So one can accomplish this by having the basis, as his or her basis of practice, ethical discipline, whether you are a practitioner of the hearer, solitary realizer, or bodhisattva vehicle. So this is the point that's being made. It says, hence, or therefore, because of this, the conqueror repeatedly praised it from many perspectives. Because one needs this as the basis for all of the results of the pathways, the Buddha praised that as being an excellent practice, because it's the foundation of all of the pathways. So this is the point that's being made here. Dixon.
다워디 콘도 자투슈발레스 노드 장고도와 자투슈발레 게이추나 셰샤와 게이추나 셰샤와는 먹이주봉 수제도 말바 게이추나 셰샤와네 하다미 지구 네 편송소바 탄제지 자유된노스 먹이주봉 수제인데 하다미 대상투비 자유된데스 하다미 대상데 먹이주봉 수제라된 도구르마도 먹이주봉 수제매바 하다미 대상 도구 말레스
주선
년도다 라산제지 샹주지 자유된노스 먹이주봉 수제여나 년도다 라산제지 샹주 도도그래 자정바 도도그래 먹이주봉 수제매나 년도다 라산제지 샹주 도도 말 대여서 먹이주봉 수제데 년도다 라산제지 샹주 자유된데스 자유된데스 라나마바 한다바 주비 샹주지 자유된노 먹이주봉 수제여나 사제고봉 도도그래 라나마베 사제고봉 도도그래 먹이주봉 수제매나 라나마바 한다바 주비 사제고봉 도마도바 인소서 사제고봉 도비 사와레스 자유된 이노 자유된 강시나 데다데스 자유된 강신나스 강신은 데다데 Gawaju Lena des Sayuden Gawaju led Magiju Musidin Marbeta Gawaju led Jagures Shetan so what the Duji Duji Tabat Jiju Mara Yang Ulma Jileg.
So when we have now a quote from the Questions of the Naga Kings of the Ocean. So it says, what I have called virtues are the taproots of the perfections of all the deities and humans. They are the taproots of the enlightenment of the Shravakas and Prachika Buddhas. They are the taproots of all the unexcelled perfect enlightenment. And what are these taproots? They are the 10 virtuous actions. So if we look at what is the basis of the experience of rebirth into the higher realms of the deities and humans, we find that its root basis, and they use the word taproot, but if we look at the Tibetan, those two words are just there, root and basis. So the root basis for the higher realms is ethics. The root basis for the enlightenment of the hearers and the solitary realizer vehicle is ethics. And the root basis for the achievement of Buddhahood, complete Buddhahood, perfect enlightenment, is ethics. So it's saying, what are these root bases? They are the 10 virtuous actions. So it's saying that virtue is the basis for all of these potential results. The result of higher realm rebirth, the result of liberation. I know it's not a result, but we're using that word as a name. Just the result of liberation or the result of complete Buddhahood. So these are all have at their basis ethics, and here ethics are what are ethics? It says virtuous actions, so 10 virtuous actions.
Chongdang Chongchedang, Chongdang Chongchedang, Chongdedang, Tangazu Chongba Chewatang, Chongwa Ri Moyoro, Chongdang Chongchedang, Chongdedang, the Sul de Shiru, Shida Gusamata, Chongba Damada Moyoro, Tangazu Kanaragaina, and then Chongba Chesatang, Dingtang, Chong Moyoro, then I was Sondis. Chongdang Chongchedang, Chongdedang, Jungdang, Yukuradang, Jabi Pudang Taji dance. Jabak Buddha Tajida, and the Zatan Shin Kebada, and then Peda Shin Tajida, Leji Tatajida, Sabunji, Tutaji, that's Sabun, what in the Mobuya Maravata, Ludu Taji Jan, Jeshin, and the Saladene. The Saladen, Chongba, or Tukalo Saladen, Saladen, Salamaden, Tumba, what is on the inside? And the Saladen, Shintan, Shinkebata, Meda, Leji Tataji, Sabunji, Tutaji, Ludu, and then Corn rice, and the Ebo, Tama Shindun, Gangalo, and the Saladen Jogurota, Jishins, Moatan. She was dance. More than the Tsong-kha-pa the mother. And also treasure Modona, Namgyal Babaina, and the Langu down to Sugmogrota. Shinkal Tadu Mogoroa. She was dance. More than Tsong-kha-pa the mother. The song also treasure Modota. Treasure than what they Shinkama sat near Zugorota. And then the Shingamadu sat the under the Zunda Mother, Dodo Zundra, and then she was, and then she Namjigi sat the Dodo Zunda, the Yamazu.
Okay.
What the Nazo, sure just sure what the Natail Debbie, what the Redisha. She was dance, she was, remember the Saya Dodo Zero, and the Southern Yamazu. Yamazu treasure, she just she intelligent, and the Kambazina, those young Sanjamazur.
Less so.
What the she was what the Ridsha. She was down. Joanna and Salatentis, Joan to Galo, Salatendiores, the Daki Nen Sayinos, and then Tronton Tronchella Suba, and the Shina Selazuba, she down to Tamaki Nete, Salatene, Salatendiore, Sata Tangic Net is example, my example. Louis Jabo, Tejin Tos, with Tejin to Gawaju Leje, Lang Gawaju Leje Lang. Dadane, Gwaji, Legend, Dadane, Hatan, Marjawatans, Gwaji, Mogijumo Sutin Marbeta, Mogijumo Sutin de, Hai, Hatan made it to be Tare, Dere, and Lubata Maluba, Netu Luba, Netu Maluba, Netu Lubasana, Netu Papa, Tonla Golamba to the Marbe, Maluba Sana Dajum Mar Araha, Netu. Netu Tonlan Golan Somte, Luba Ayaro Ayane, Shog Aya, Tene Muluba Sana Araharo, Netu Dajumba. Tene Rangel the Dab Marve. Luba Malubi, Gijungi Debo, Tuba dance. Luba Malubi, Gijungi Debutea, Magujumu Sudilla Ten Tuyo, Tamad and Dabudua, Tuba dance. Ran Sanjay Janchu dance, Ran Sanjay Janchu, and Ran Sanjay Janchu dance, and the Ran Sanjay Janchu Diamagaju Sudilla and Toyo. Shanchu Sembi, Shuba Tanjida, Shanchu Sanjiva, Shuba Shindula Soba, passing to the passing jealous of the Tama, and the Magaju Sudilla and Yoris. Shuba Tanjida, Sanjay Chutanji, Tanji. Nay in a Mogitum Sudin to what the nay in a Shesson sauce, Salvajano,
Lupa, Papa Yingu. Papa Yingu?
Luba Sana,
Papa Yingu?
Tola, Golan, Luba said Luba, Luba Sana, and the Cosutan that doesn't want to a Marulon Jewuro, Lulon Jewuro, Luba said, Netu Tola, Golamba, the Luba, Luba in there. Tama Dajum to a Mar, Tandago Lujon Luba. Dajum to Sadin Lugo Mar, Maluba.
Mellow cheaper. Okay. Yeah. So then we're going to get into some examples from the same text, the questions of the Naga kings of the ocean. It says, for example, O Lord of Nagas, all villages, cities, municipalities, districts, countries, and kings' palaces, all grass, bushes, medicinal herbs, and trees, all fruits of labor, all stocks of seeds, the growth of harvest, their plowing, harrowing, and production everything rests on the earth. Their source is the earth. Likewise, O Lord of Nagas, these paths of the 10 virtuous actions are the sources of divine or human birth, of attaining the goal of the virtuous practices of the learners and those with no more to learn in the enlightenment of the Prachika Buddha, of all the bodhisattva deeds and of all the qualities of the Buddha. So here it's saying that when we look at all of these different examples, it's giving examples of different sizes of places, everything from a whole country, the world, to small cities, to large cities, to smaller cities, to little villages. No matter what, all of these places have as the basis the earth. So the earth is the basis for all of these things. And then if we look at the activities that go on within these places, you see it says the growth of harvest, their plowing, harrowing, and production. So if we look at the actual plowing of the field, Rinpoche said previously these things had to be done manually, like they would go on an animal and plowing would be done where the ground would be tilled and then rows would be made for the seeds to be planted, and then the ground would be smoothed in some way with a machine, a manual machine, if you will. So the ground would be smoothed in some way. So then all of this, when we look at these activities that are taking place, have as their basis the earth. So the place itself has as its basis the earth, and then the activities that are going on all have as their basis the earth. So then when we look at that as the example, and then apply it to what we're speaking of, we're saying that the 10 virtuous actions are the basis for all of these other things that are going to be explained. They're the basis for the humans and deity rebirth. They are the basis for the goal of the virtuous practice of the learners and with those of no more to learn, of the enlightenment of a Prajna Buddha. So here, when we're speaking of learners and no more to learn, if it is one is a learner, he or she is necessarily at the path of seeing or the path of meditation. A no more learner is a being who has achieved the path of foe destroyer or the path of no more learning. So the dividing line between learner and non-learner is the foe destroyer. So if one has completed the path of seeing and meditation and is at the path of no more learning, then he is no longer a learner. So he or she is no longer a learner. So this is what is meant by learners and one with no more to learn. I asked Rinpoche if one is a learner, if he or she is necessarily an Arya, and he said yes. So that was the question that I asked. So it is the path of seeing and path of meditation where we find these learners, and the no more to learn, path of no more learning, and here they are foe destroyers. So here it's speaking of the enlightenment of the Prajna Buddha, of all the bodhisattva deeds and the qualities of the Buddha. So all of the activities of the bodhisattva have as their basis virtuous practices, ethical practices, and all of the qualities of the Buddha, the excellent qualities of the Buddha, have as their basis virtuous actions or ethical behavior. And in this case, we're speaking of the 10 virtues specifically. In this case, so it says, these paths of the 10 virtuous actions are the sources. So here, they're the basis of all of these results, just like the earth is the basis for all of these other examples. So this is what is meant by that. Dixon. So when we look at the mantra within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha, when we're looking at where the learners and no more learners are, we have Teata Om Gate Gate. These refer to the path of accumulation and path of preparation, which are not Arya paths, so they are not what we're talking about. Paragate and Parasamgate are referring to the path of seeing and the path of meditation. These are necessarily Arya paths, and these are what we're referring to as learners. Bodhisoha is the path of no more learning, and this is what we're referring to when we state non-learners or no more learners. So within the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find this mantra that implicitly is referring to these 5 paths, and 2 of them being the path of a learner, and the one of them being a no more learning path. Dixon. So we'll take a short break. We have some.
Lena jutu temba ta ledan trivitan la povas. Lena jutu temba ta janji saji sun dine tanda de saji ka tut barba. Lena jutu temba do tan tenju ko lena jutu tu sombares.
Dodan tenju.
Dodan tenju.
Tenju gare.
Tenju de tele chero de gudam je lejelan chu son so de marba. Wo de sujirwa. Ta danma magjubu uchu son a jira phan jibres. What did the Pajan from the Marva? What in the Dada de Katu de Ma, the Ledero?
The last
Magaju Poya, Magaju Students on Ajida Penchibures, that what Tamad Chin and Tandane Sajubi Lojimade, Sajuba. These Sajubin Doles, Sajubin Dole, do the Sajuba. Magaju Sudinla, Abajubi. Mogijumu Sudinla, Habituansa, Mogijumu Sudin Sheda Yabures, Mogijumu Sudin de, and Nintugang Saware, Rajang Saware, Shanju Semilang Saware, Sanjig Saware, Dendri Sawares, Omanjuval and Omanjuval Sumaris, Omanjuva.
Okay.
Omanjuvale, Suzu Natan, Sunje Dan, Rajan Chula Dining Anatan. Jesse Najing Abba Lebana, Montujun, Suzin Legemes, Suzu, Nathan, 소소 주나다 송제 다스 다 소소 주라다 소소 주 안에 dendro toile magi jubo shooting gormato magi jubo shooting mena ane den hadame den tuayo ma so juna da sonje se de netu gna to tuala ya magi jubo shooting gores so juna da sonje da netu sanjin de da toa je se do de ba de so juna da sonje da rajan chola se de ranje Raja Galan to Valaya, Magijubung sitting the Kijore, Raja Chola dining anata. Jesse Najing Napa Lebane, Jesse Shanchu Sambaro, Napa Leba, and Ngalita Tabat Hanji Chambat to Injera. Motujun sitting the James, Motu Ladami, going to be Judea, sitting Labayoma, sitting Yamares, Magijubung sitting there, Ladami, it doesn't to be a Jew to 타바타 산지신 바도 주주래 년토글랑 또 주주래 라제글랑 또 주주래 샤주 샘비 타바타 산지신 방엘도 주주래 또 오만지 벌 송도스
and then Meiji Susuju Nyantu Rangel
Susuju Natas Sonji Da Susuju Julga Mobile Susuju to Latami Tantoya what took Galo Nogijubo Chudin attending over this. Suju Nada Sonji Senara Neturo Netu Sonji Netu not to Mogijubo Chudin attending over this.
Rimche, did Papa Mayimbi Nyantu? Gangisina Susuju?
That the Papa Netu Sujitan, Netu Papa. Okay,
Raja
Sujita, Raja Baba,
Shansen
Sujita, Shansen Baba, Tendijana Digun.
Okay, let's so.
Yeah, Oma Kumaras in order to see you.
Okay, two Chena. It says, therefore, so the point that's made is, and we look at Jayan Sheba's outline, we find first the why it's the principal teaching and by relying upon the sources of the sutras and so forth. And then we next find out why one should engage in virtue or the benefits of engaging in virtue and abandoning non-virtue. So that's the section that we're dealing with currently. And it shows that all of the results of higher realm rebirth, liberation of the hearers and solitary realizers, all of the bodhisattva's deeds, all of the Buddhist qualities, all of these things have as the basis, their basis, ethical discipline. And here we're specifically speaking of the 10 virtuous actions. So the basis of all of these fruits, if you will, or results, is the 10 virtuous actions. It says, therefore, Chandrakirti, in the commentary on the Middle Way, summarized the significance of the Buddha's praise in the Sutra on the 10 levels for the ethical discipline in which you eliminate the 10 non-virtues. So here it says, for ordinary beings, those born from the Buddha's speech, those whose natures are certain as self-enlightened or conquerors' children, there are no causes of certain goodness or high status apart from ethical discipline. So we begin with this for ordinary beings. I asked Rinpoche if this is necessarily speaking of non-Aryas. He said that in this case we can say that it's referring to, because in the Tibetan it's saying all those ordinary beings and then those born from, so it's referring to these three types. So I was asking if it's referring specifically to a non-superior, and Rinpoche said no. This could be for ordinary superiors and non-superior hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So here it says, those born from the Buddha's speech. This is referring to those hearer practitioners. Those whose natures are certain as self-enlightened. This is speaking of the Prachika Buddhas, a solitary realizer vehicle. Superiors or non-superiors. Or conquerors' children. So here this is speaking of the Bodhisattva vehicle. So it's saying that all of the causes for certain goodness or high status among that relate that are the fruits of these different vehicles or actions have as their basis or cause ethical discipline. So here it's saying that there are no causes of certain goodness or high status. So high status being rebirth into the higher realms, certain goodness being liberation of the hearers, solitary realizers, or complete Buddhahood. So we could be speaking of all. So these are all the potential positive results that can happen in the future. Rebirth in the higher realms, and liberation of the two lesser vehicles, and then the liberation of the great vehicle. So we find that all of these have as their cause, all of these potential results have as their cause ethical discipline. And here we're speaking of the 10 virtuous activities. And Rinpoche said if we want to seek more clarification, we can look in the Panchen Sonandrapa's clarification of this text. Because I was asking about the ordinary beings part, and he said we can seek out more clarification in the university text, Panchen Sonandrapa's text. So it's stating that it is of great benefit to abandon the 10 non-virtuous activities. So here it's saying that when we look at a course summary of behaviors, we can find them enumerated as 10. One should abandon those 10 non-virtuous activities that are presented, and one should engage in the 10 virtuous activities that are presented. The Sumba? Okay, Tuche. Go get Mepchi.
Tuche Ponga Sandere. What the Tudin Haji Soma member, Nateba Chemi is Lava Yinan, the Tuchure, Junshi waters, Jun Chembum Hawa, Jun Machulami to change it, or Jun Chembum Hawa. Sanji Junden the Tanji Chishengas, Sanji Junden the Tanji Chishenga, Jiden La, Hoa Sheba, Chebam Hawa, this Sanji Junden the Shenga. And the good student Hajima Sumbala, Koteba Chamber is Lava Yina, and Tebachum Maibate, Swanji Samak Changris, Sanji Marbe, Swanji Junden the Tanji Shengar, Jiden la loa sheba sa. Sanji tu tongjian do na ko sentient la loa sheba dun she ko res. Sheba cheba mawa des. Cheba mawa de. Cheba mawa de. De mo jin do chi du she jin mo jin de chi du she lo ba tong an ro she song so sa. Ta ko mo ba je ne su jin ta je ma song ba je nga te ba chen bi is de la ba ina. Anu ko mo ba res me je ne ko de la yo res. Mo jin do o du je ba ina ane she du je anu lo ba tong an. Ro se ta nga song na ba dan jin de.
Okay.
Lo ba tong an ro she song so sa. O de ba ji ju ja ga. Lo ba tong an ne tantric do ngendu megi nandon su ko shawos loba ton sa de ngason ro lagres ngason ro sananda ngandu ton sa na chibares loba ton ane tantric do ngendu megi nanda megi michibares mijil dawata sherasin mini lavandavres o
The Zun Chenpo Mawa Dondagare.
Machulami du chen samarwa.
Zun Chen. Chenpo Mawa.
Ta nga zo su juba ma je ba le ba ma zo ma jo ju se la ma.
Oh, lying. Okay. Zun, great lying.
Ju chu chu de she ba la ju de ma ro. An nga dra chu ba za da da. Nga ngun shi to ga de la so na ju chen re ma ju chen. Machulami ju chen so de sa de. Chenmo ma chu bare Chenmo ma ware ane sanje jonden taji shenga ngosung chen jin do jiden lo je go lo je bi cheba ma wa de
Chepa Mawa Sena?
cheba ma wa song dul ta go lo ba ta an jin ro.
Okay. Okay. Decent.
Yeah.
So here, then we find this quote. So it says, the Khensur Mawa, the Lei Omare, Demaji Omare, the Drapudu.
Oh, den la jan de.
Dixon.
Yeah.
Okay. So repeatedly guard your ethical discipline by maintaining a sense of restraint. There are some who have no such restraint, even with regard to a single practice of ethical discipline, yet still say, I am a practitioner of the Mahayana. This is very dishonorable. And then the Sutra of Sita Garbha says, so by means of these 10 paths of virtue, you will become a Buddha. However, there are those who, for as long as they live, do not even minimally maintain even a single path of virtuous action, but who say such things as, I am a Mahayana practitioner. I seek unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Such people are great hypocrites and liars. They deceive the world in the presence of all the Bhagavan Buddhas, and they preach nihilism. When they die, they seem confused and they fall back. So within this, this is speaking of the category for Jayan Sheva is abandonment of hypocrisy, or abandoning, I think hypocrisy is a fine word to use, abandoning the lie, and it's the hypocrisy. So here it says, however, there are those who, for as long as they live, do not even minimally maintain even a single path of virtuous action. So there are those beings who say they are Mahayana practitioners, but they don't assert or practice even one single path of virtue. But they say they seek Buddhahood, when virtue is the basis of all of these fruits that come up to and including Buddhahood. So here, the hypocrisy is saying that one is a Mahayanist, which requires as its basis ethical discipline and then not engaging in ethical discipline. And it says that a person who behaves in this way and asserts things in this way is asserting the tenets of nihilism and will therefore fall to the lower realms of cyclic existence. It says such people are great hypocrites and liars. They lie to the world. They deceive the world in the presence of all the Buddhas. So it says here, the Buddhas are all knowing. So the Buddhas know that this deception is taking place. So there isn't a complete deception that is really even taking place, because the Buddha realizing that it's taking place. And as a result of this wrong view, which is nihilism, they fall to the lower realms of cyclic existence, even though they claim to be Mahayana practitioners of the great, most highest vehicle that we find within Buddhism. Digson. Digson. I wrote 3 down. I don't know why, but I'll remember maybe. So now we're on page 218, because we'll read through. You should understand falling back to be a synonym for taking a completely miserable rebirth. So now 218, the determination of the effects of actions. It says, there are 3 parts to the determination of the effects of actions. Okay, now going to the Tibetan again, it doesn't say non-virtuous. It says black actions and their results, white actions and their results, and a presentation of other classifications of karma. So here, now Rinpoche is explaining black actions are referring to non-virtuous actions, and in this case 10 non-virtuous actions. White actions are referring to virtuous actions, and in this case 10 virtuous actions. So when we look at the Tibetan, what does black action and white action mean? It's referring to what they've just translated it into in the English. That, just to make a note of what Rinpoche is explaining and why it's different. So it's speaking of black actions being non-virtuous, white actions being virtuous, and then another category which is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, or neither black or white, rather. A category that is separate, that is neither black nor white action. So that's literally what it says. And then it says the first category is black actions and their results. And it says it's explained in 3 parts. The actual paths of non-virtuous action, distinctions of weight, and an exposition of the effects. So these are the 3 categories that are explained. And then it says the first category of non-virtuous action. I'm just going to read what it says in the Tibetan. I've explained the black and white once, so I'm just going to read in the English rather, just to make it not confusing. The actual paths of non-virtuous actions. The 10 paths of non-virtuous actions are as follows. So we're going to begin with the non-virtue of the body, and those are enumerated, the 3. And it begins with the action of killing, which is non-virtuous. So this is where we begin with killing.
간주 된주 걸로죠 되라고 로죠 뭐 다가서 대 간주 된주 차차다로다 어디 나는데 기본적으로 소문다 사지고도 도와 상각은 도와래도 다만 오만주바다 주다 어디 오만주반 장다도 말베 어 다른
Lesso, Basu Bandhu. Okay, so then it says killing. What is killing? The Compendium of Determinations. Well, let's try that again. The Compendium of Determinations teaches this in 5 categories. So here, what is the Compendium of Determinations? This is a text by Master Asanga. We find a Master Asanga depicted back here among the pictures of the Pandits. So when we look at the 2 categories, the pronouncements of Lord Buddha in the authentic Indian commentaries, we're truly studying those texts because right now we're finding the points made by Master Asanga, who is an Indian Pandit. We find his text in the category of the Tanjur, the authentic Indian commentaries. And then previously we had a quote from the Basu Bandhu from the Treasury House of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Kosha. So we find that as well. Then we have a quote from Entrance to the Middle Way by Chandrakirti. Chandrakirti is depicted among the Middle Way scholars over here among the Indian Pandits and would fall categorically under the authentic Indian commentaries. And then we have all the quotes from the sutras, which are the pronouncements of Lord Buddha. So we can say that in this text, we're currently studying this text, but we're currently also studying the pronouncements of Lord Buddha and the authentic Indian commentaries, and by a direct way, by directly looking at the quotes from the text, not just the contents and the meanings. We're directly looking at and citing them as sources. So we're studying those great works as well while we're studying this. So when we look at Master Asanga's body of work, we find that we can break it down into 2 major categories. The 5 treatises on the levels, which we have the actuality of the levels, or the levels of yogic practice, the Yogacara Bhumi, the Compendium of Ascertainments, the Nirana Samgraha, the Compendium of Bases, the Bastu Samgraha, the Compendium of Enumerations, the Pariya Samgraha, and the Compendium of Explanations, the Vivara Samgraha. So we have those 5 treatises, and then we have the 2 compendiums, which are called the Compendium of Knowledge and the Compendium of on the Mahayana. So the compendium, the Abhidharma Samuchaya. The Doa. So these are the Compendium of Determinations or Compendium of Knowledge and the Compendium of the Mahayana. So these are the categories, the 5 treatises on the levels and the 2 compendiums. So we find that Basu Bandhu has a total of the Lopunine Gatsudue. So we find that Basu Bandhu has a total of 8 texts that are studied, and then Maitreya has a total of Shamba Nga. Shansu Nga. Okay, it's Shansu Denga. Has the 5. Lord Maitreya has the 5 treatises. So we have the Asanga with the 5 treatises on the levels, and then the 2 compendiums, and then we have Basu Bandhu with the 8 texts, and then we have Lord Maitreya with the 5 great works on 5 great works of Maitreya. So we find that all these texts are the different texts that are being referred to here. So they're called the 5 treatises of the Maitreya doctrine, literally. So these are some of the texts that we find.
단도와 사등하다 도나니가 나네 도와들이도 도와래 수주비 레드 용화라 다 주스고는 다 근데 제주는 이제 상고르지 이제 응아 상고르지 나 수주비 레드 제발라 네다 주스나도 가다 주소도 응아 상고르지 나 주소 담도 제제 되는 예바 두시지 되면 delà de chez ce gros de chez de samba ji de nyomo ba ji ne tatu nga sang gores son sha nga son chance de du chez samba nyomo ba somba de samba dans le dune qui dans le gres ane nga son jans papa son samba dudes papa son je du je samba nyomo je du je somana papa son du je dans samba de nyomo son de marbe nyomo son de samba dans dudes je samba joa tatu je samba joa tatu wadan je ja nan de raison da Papa son samba de joie ne va jamais joie sujebi joie ne va jamais jetant samba dans joie dans tatu ne sujebi le de wala cheju ne je tsangures samba tsangures joie tsangures tatu de je tsansuna sujebi le de wores je du de chena anjuba de chin gomba de magilo sa gomba de magilo te tandiche ne abdu se che marba roz ji jana suje ba kanje na suje bi le de ta do suje le de wala do le nga go se do
Jezuna Kandre.
Jezuna duché dans samba dans nyomo basonte samba dans dune samba
dans den lame duché
c'est marba duché c'est ta meina duché te bereja mama bereja matashi se gareja water ke tra duché marba duché je ane samba sana segu samba de jiro
lasso
segu samba ane samba da nyomo batan de chata to son kanron jire
okay
nyomo batan de son de samba dans le degrés
and tama
tatu sa jivan jibare
tatu they indicate seek ni okay diksum So what is killing? So the Compendium of Determinations teaches this in 5 categories. So a Sangha's Compendium of Determinations has 5 categories, and then it'll go on to say that you can condense it by placing some of them into the attitude category, etc. So I'm going to read it. Basis, perception, attitude, affliction, and conclusion. However, you can condense the middle 3 into the category of attitude and add the category of performance to give a condensed presentation of each of the paths of action in 4 categories: basis, attitude, performance, and culmination. Such a presentation is easy to understand, and there is no contradiction between it and the intention in a Sangha's teaching. So it's saying that there is nothing that contradicts what a Sangha is presenting in 5 by doing it in these 4 categories because they include the presentation. So here it's saying that if we look at these 5, if we were to take basis, perception, and affliction and put it into the category of attitude, and then add another category of performance and keep the final category of conclusion. Here it says culmination. They use 2 words, but it's the same. That's what was getting me mixed up as I was trying to translate and listen. These are the same categories. The culmination, conclusion are just 2 words for the same word. So we're basically just adding those 3 into attitude, and then adding performance, and then we get a total of 4 categories. So basis here is referring to the basis, the kind of being that can do these things. So the basis is what does action. So here we're speaking of gods, or humans, etc., etc., etc. So this is what basis is speaking of. Perception is the thought, and then we have attitude, which is the way of thinking, and affliction is afflictions, and then the finale. So these are the 5 categories. This is however you can condense the middle 3 into the category of attitude, as we've just explained, and add the category of performance to give a condensed presentation of each of the paths in 4 categories. So this is how we do that, and then it says basis, attitude, performance, and conclusion or culmination, and would be the way we would, these would be the 4 categories, and it says it's easy to understand and doesn't contradict the Sangha. Diksun.
Tasu jeva dalo de je samba joa tatu je changure smarbe su jebe le diwala je changure samba changure joa changure tatu je changona and su jebe le diwure.
So when
na doa ge wa de nga so do de the son de wa de samba tu jana je jana abu wares marbe.
Then so here, in order for killing to take place, there have to be, according to a Sangha, these 5 categories of basis, perception, attitude, affliction, and conclusion. And then what's being said after is that we can condense it into 4 categories, and these things all need to be present in order for there to be an action of killing, for instance. So we're in the category of killing, so these are going to be our standard that we're going to use to qualify it as an action of killing in this case. So it would be these 4 present. So that's it.
Ta suje bijes gen ta kante su dan de sinje jira lagres su dan de sinje de suje bijes de res su dan de sinje ji so ba ina ana wa de suje bile de yongoro a suje bi su dan de sinje de su na tin zhe dan de na shi den ga yin bo zhe je na su de zhe dan na shi ga ru den de ce de me du ji is ha je na su densa ka long darjela lo darjela dana su sagres su marbe anga sun daba le jode ya sa je le chwe je ba yina te su long da ga su na machine go da su long sa je do de da ya
So long the nga da
te su de wa de long le ja hu ha je na long le ja ga do
do dem and duje.
ah nje je na wa de zhe de na shi ga rong ge den de ju bi ཚད ནས སོག ཚེ་ཉིས ཚད་ན ནས ཁང གོ དེ ཇུ ལོང དེ ཧ ཅེ ན སོག ཚེ་ཉིས ཡ ན རིགོ ཇུ རོ ད ཚད་ན ནས ལོང དང གա སོ ན ane ཚབ ཉང རོ ཇུ རོ ཚབ མར ཚད་ན ནས ཁང དེ ཇུ བི ནས what the ལོང དང གա སོ ན ནས མེ བར ན ཇུ རོ ད ཇུ མེ བར ན ཁོ ད what the long de source so long de ba cha zuna de yin de ge na ji me ba cha de ge de de na ji ga rong ge de ju de de ji su da de bi se ji ji la na su ju bi ji se de res xin ju na su ju yong ma ro da xin su yo ma ro
lesser
what the ko su yu ge ji se ji ji de ni ji se su na ko su yo de ro su ju bi le de yong res
the denji. Okay.
Just how much you
Okay, Tambo. So when we look at this first category of basis of killing, then we first have to have a sentient being present to kill. So when we look at basis, then there has to be a sentient being to kill. So if we look at cutting down a tree, this wouldn't categorically fall under killing. So this is where we start to understand what makes it a killing, because we start with the basis of what we're killing. or what is to be killed. And here it's a sentient being is the basis. Here it means that one removes the life force of a sentient being. So in the Sutra tradition, or we find in the Abhidharma, or in the Abhidharma tradition, if you will, that the life force is necessarily, let me see, what did I write down? Life force is a non-associated compositional factor. So according to the Abhidharma, life force is a non-associated compositional factor. And it means when the presence of the consciousness and the breathing are there is life force. When that is ended and there is no longer that is severed, then their life isn't present. So we're looking at the word life and life force. The life itself is present because of the life force. According to, like I said, Abhidharma, life force is non-associated compositional factors. In the tantric tradition, life force is wind. So the life force is necessarily wind, so it's a separate category than in the that vehicle. Once you stop breathing in and out, then you perish. So this is the reason that it's stated in the tantric tradition that the life force is wind. So life is what basically contains, if you will, the consciousness and the breathing and so forth that the life force establishes. And once that's severed, then there's no longer life force, there's no longer life. Once you sever, if you sever someone else's, another sentient being's life force, there's no longer life, then that's killing. So this is the category of killing. Its basis is a sentient being and severing his or her or its life force or life. So ending the life of a sentient being is how we would define killing. It's not Buddhist.
The one mom machabas. I mean, to win both China, cook on the lava maruta. Kota niggas both shows us what the members in the massive eyes. To
So then there's a large debate that when the mother and father's secret substances come together, and then if you were then to remove that baby, so abortion, would that be a severing of life? So this is a debate that takes place then in religion, and then we use these points in order to engage in this debate. So according to the Compendium of Determinations, when the baby begins to form in the mother's womb, or stomach, Rinpoche is saying, in the mother's stomach, which is when the substances come together, when those substances come together and the consciousness is there, then at that moment, according to a Sangha, you would end a life if you killed that being in the stomach. So we would say that it would be killing according to this. That ending it at any point when those substances come together and there's consciousness, at that moment there's killing if it's removed. So when something is established as a human, then when it is killed, it's killing. And also another master of the Vinaya, not Gunaprabha, Shakyaprabha. Senge Zampo. Yeah. Senge Zampo. I know who's Haribhadra. Senge Zampo, the Parshin Delpa.
The Pashin
Rinpoche is saying maybe the master, I don't know the name. I know the Tibetan that he's saying. I don't know the name in Sanskrit, and he's saying he doesn't think they're among the pandits. This master is among the pandits. The Vinaya scholar that Rinpoche is citing is among the pandits. So we have to be, it's important that we're very careful.
다 수주벌에 지메지 수술이 젬바지고 그래. 수술 세나 수주벌에 용 말이스.
So if one kills oneself, then because it's not an other sentient being, it wouldn't fall categorically under killing. Suchu, the Ransei.
수단 댐비 생제때 대양 서버보 라니 서나스 서버보 랑 서버이나 서나 요아 데바 요장사 타투 매비스 수주빌레 용 말이스. 수주빌레 용알아 바로 젠지 소소 젬바지 그래.
Leso.
고네 내주셔비 살레 소차 파르보 셰송소사 다들 소소리 젬바지 세고도
So then the
소소고 소소세나 요아 디바 요아르데 수주빌레 용 말이스.
Lujimi Gewa Le Sumba Karum Mayimbi.
수주빌레도 많이 나오고 말에 파르보 수가지고 그래스.
Then the Luimi Gewa Yin Sumka Mayin.
요아 먹으래스. 그런 세비레 가지 지바로 좀 먹어버렸어.
That's it.
다도 수주비 레드 용 말이스.
That's it.
파르보 수가 많이 배지.
Leso. So it says among these, the basis of killing is a being who is alive. Moreover, the levels of yogic deeds adds the qualification other, as in another living being. This is in consideration of cases of suicide and when there is a sin of commission that lacks culmination. So here it's saying that the qualification is other, different sentient beings. So technically speaking, in this case, this wouldn't be killing when one is committing suicide. So what I was talking with Rinpoche, this falls categorically under something that's non-virtue of the body that isn't among those three. So that's what the conversation that we were having.
내주시비 사등하거나 내주시비 살려와데 수자 파르보 세바스 송도와스
The Sangha.
소소리 젬바지 세고레스.
Papa Tome.
Yes.
So in the Lord of Sangha's level of yogic deeds, it says that it has an other, a different person. So this other is referring to outside of oneself. So in this case, this is how it omits suicide as a case of killing, technically, in this case.
소소세 나와도 수주빌레 용도와.
So when one kills oneself, he or she does not commit the deed of killing. In this, according to what killing is defined as.
다 제세겐도 왔더니 제대 수주비제 세겐데 네 수단 댐비 간자 파르보데 제레스 수단 댐비 간자 파르 세존나 안나 수주빌레 용오레스 라세나 수다 요아르데 네 수주빌레 용마레스 간자 파르보 마레스 네 파르보 예바데 내주시비 살레 네 란 가사 내주시비 살레 수자 파르보 셰송소사 란레 젬비 젬다지 세바지 송요아레스 셰송소사.
So the levels of yogic deeds, it says there are three aspects of attitude: perception, motivation, affliction, and perception has four types. So the levels of yogic deeds adds the qualification of other in the case of killing to show that it's an outside being, not oneself. And then there will be four types. The Geshe Lharampa, Rinpoche, Chenmo Lharampa.
수주빌레들 제 삼바 요타도 지 상고로와.
Leso.
다 제트 간에 고고르스나 수단 때문에 가자 바르보데 제레스 수단 때문에 가자 바르보지 세소나 수주빌레 용오레.
So
소소로 수요아레데 소소세나 수주빌레 용마레 바르보 마레스 내주시비살 수자 바르보 세송베스.
So when we look at the act of killing, it has to have these four categories necessarily for it to be an act of killing. And according to the level of yogic deeds, there is not these four present when we're speaking of the killing of oneself, because there's a qualification within that means that the basis is other. So this is the reason why we say that it's killing. Suicide isn't killing in the definition of killing according to Buddhism. Then
that page is on good.
So that's, Rinpoche said that's it. The wrong say, Lu Mgewa Sumba Karung Yin, Mayan.
So jubilee my is a good one.
Then de Sumba Karung Yimbi Macha, show wrong say.
Wrong say about you just na.
Lu Mgewa Yin.
Diba is a good one. So jubilee my. So jubilee the la. Kansa soja paribus was a Nanju Salus.
Less.
Raleigh Jamba Sevas Buddhist.
Then Deepa Yinde?
Diba injured that. Doan the bomber is a bombo. So jebe what the Ransafina, Pomba Yungumaris, Mero, zero. Massive Pomba Yungumaris, Bombers, Tomagada, Junagada town. Bombers get his water.
Bombo.
Bombers in a Pomba one around my but Tanda Jin, Gada something in the
So I was just asking Rinpoche for a little more clarification on the killing, because in English it would just be considered killing, but in this case it's speaking specifically because of the way it's qualified for what killing is. There's an other person that one has to kill. Now that's not saying that killing isn't a great killing oneself. I can't even say that anymore. Committing suicide is not a great misdeed. It severs one's potential, it talks about in the Vinaya. So it is a great misdeed, but it doesn't categorically fall under killing, because killing, you have to kill something other than yourself. So that's just, it's a technical qualification in this case, explained in that way.
I just have one quick question.
Okay,
yeah.
Jupo say.
Yeah.
Rinpoche, where does the person who goes that commits suicide, once they're dead, do they go to the hell realms?
The Ran Sena and Yawadro. The motivation at that moment is very important at that moment. So we can't say definitely. If the motivation is bad, we can infer usually, then yes, it would be a lower realm rebirth. So you sever your potential because you have this human basis, and to get it again after killing it makes it difficult to receive another human basis again in the future. So it creates that trouble. When you kill your human body, you have this basis. It ends all of your opportunities, and then it makes it difficult to get another human basis again.
Yeah.
So we'll do the concluding. Yes, Ted.
Okay. This is yours. Okay.
So, what you know how the high lamas, they go into meditation and they pass in that way. How does the life force end with them?
The Lama Chenmo, the Khensur, the Xie Du, Drone Du, Khensur Gongjal Du, then Sansan the Nima Ju, Sansan Nima Junga the De Shu Du. Then the So De Du, then Kandre Dro Du, Khensur Poa Da Du, Kongi Triwa, the So Kandre the Jewa Shema Dro Du. Lama Chenmo.
So na ta so the day samarba.
Less so.
Day it has.
Less so.
Shulugu Uche Sabres, Shulugu Uche, and then Udra Mabacha Sarwata, Nalul Nashi Dedurus, Dedurus. Tanha Kalamba, Chaba Malamba, Nyato, you say, what the Balinja.
So at that point in time, the outer wind of that being has the Tramo Yuribe. Tramo Yuribe, Rapa Yomare.
Nalul Sab Drete Dosagota.
Okay.
Shant Triba Paki Junior Mishapu Juji de Marva.
Lesser.
Dada to Taji Jena, Drete de Dus, Su de Rota.
Then long
Shulu
Yure.
Uches of that.
So there's subtle winds are present a little in the case of these lamas. So the wind hasn't left at that point, but the outer winds have left at that point. But there's still, consciousness is still abiding and hasn't left on the wind yet. It hasn't, the consciousness hasn't left, is still abiding in that high lama's body with the subtle winds. Even though the outward expressions of life have been severed, there's still the presence of the things that qualify a being as being alive. We have still the presence of the subtle winds and still have the presence of the consciousness itself, so that being's life is still present. The life hasn't been severed. So he or she is in that state of meditation. We know the Ganden Tree Rinpoche, the previous Ganden throne holder, stayed in meditation for the Nim Shapu Juje. 19 days stayed in meditation, and they actually came. Ling Rinpoche 13 or 14 days, so Rinpoche is saying that doctors even came and tested and saw that there was still life present in these masters. So actual scientists, doctors came while they were in this state of meditation, outwardly not breathing, and confirmed the fact that they were still alive and life was still present in those beings. Then the Khensur drona, the so jewa shema. Less so. Rinpoche is explaining the stages of consciousness of the descending and ascending of the red and white drops. I don't have the vocabulary in order to give this complete presentation of what happens, but Rinpoche is saying at the subtle level, what happens is when the drops, the red and white drops drop and ascend from the crown and then from the secret place. They ascend from the secret place and they descend, right? Is that the correct way? From the crown, and they meet at the central chakra place. At that point, there's a level of subtle consciousness that's present, and then clear light is the final level of consciousness. So they're abiding in that place where we have an ascension and descension of the red and white drops and a union of them, and they're abiding in that space of clear light. So that's what's happening at a subtle level at that point in the case of the master. And you can look into the facts behind this if you look into highest yoga tantra and the drops, the ascension and descension of the drops and so forth, and the various levels that happen in that. Rinpoche is explaining that, and I just don't have the vocabulary. It's 5:05, so so that basically that Lama is abiding in a very subtle place, which is in the nature of clear light, and able to abide in that without passing to his or her next life, whatever it may be. And they stay in that meditation place, abiding in that space for however long they abide. I apologize, I don't have a grasp on some of the technical vocabulary in there, but I just don't have as much frame of reference for that. So, but we can definitely look it up. Is that okay? So, concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. Thank you, everyone. And the drops are the red and white bodhicitta, technically what they're called, the red and white bodhicitta. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Geshe Rinpoche, Gutsi Shapi Denro Nang, Natsu Lamrim Chenmo Kantriel Nang.
All is